Los Angeles Clippers exited the NBA playoffs after losing Game 6 to the Phoenix Suns at Staples Center. And if you remember towards the beginning of the playoffs, I said that the Los Angeles Clippers had a lot to play for here. They weren't just playing for an opportunity to win a championship, rather, they were playing to prove to Kawhi Leonard that this is a team that was capable of winning a championship. And judging based off of how their first stint went a year ago, despite the tumultuous pandemic and the NBA bubble, coupled with the fact that there was a ton of drama going on between Paul George, the rest of his teammates, and a very sketchy history that Paul George had with his then head coach, which we've made videos on before, coupled with the fact that Paul George even came out and admitted that he was dealing with depression. And it makes sense why the Los Angeles Clippers really didn't perform well in that playoffs. But this year it's much different, and we need to discuss what the future is going to look like for the Los Angeles Clippers. Actually, scratch that. What the future is going to look like for Kawhi Leonard. Now, before we get to the content, we are announcing a brand new giveaway. We announced it yesterday. We're giving away a next-gen console, either a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X. All you have to do is subscribe and turn on our notifications for this channel. Whether you're an old subscriber or a new subscriber, you will enter for a chance to win. The winner is going to be announced on the community tab on this channel at the beginning of August. Now, we're running the same giveaway for my Laced Up podcast once we get to 40,000 subscribers there. If you subscribe and turn on our notifications for that channel, you will also enter for a chance to win a next-gen console. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I take tremendous pride, guys, in my abilities of being a fairly unbiased commentator, although I must admit my thumbnails are fairly biased and skewed towards the Los Angeles Lakers acquiring each and every player ever becoming available via trade or via free agency. But I'd like to think that my analysis is significantly different. You see, in the very beginning of the playoffs, I came out and I told you guys that if the Clippers lost to the Dallas Mavericks in the first round of the NBA playoffs, they are effectively screwed. This is a team that is fully capped out, that has just committed to Paul George and signed him to a max contract extension, paid Marcus Morris a 4-year, $64 million contract this past offseason. Then they traded for Luke Kennard, which in theory was a good decision because they're adding a young shooter, and then immediately signed him to a 4-year, $64 million contract extension as well, which didn't end up panning out. After all, the Los Angeles Clippers have a phenomenal history where they display tremendous loyalty to players that they covet, even going as far as to call one of them Mr. Clipper before trading him to Detroit 6 months later. But that's besides the point. The Clippers had their backs against the wall, and this was a make or break season for them, and they desperately needed a floor general, and they were so desperate that they decided to move away from a player that I think could have continued to contribute to their team. Then in the first round of the NBA playoffs, the Los Angeles Clippers were able to come back against the Dallas Mavericks and advance to the second round, where they faced the Utah Jazz, the best team in the Western Conference, at least based off of regular season record. And in that series, the Los Angeles Clippers got dealt with a crushing blow when Kawhi Leonard injured his ACL, rendering him out for the entirety of the rest of the playoffs. And this is when Tyronn Lue and the Los Angeles Clippers finally began to display that this is a team that could win a championship. You see, prior to the series against the Utah Jazz, I would think that Kawhi Leonard is thinking that he could go to the Golden State Warriors via a sign and trade. Life would be easier for him. It would be significantly further from Los Angeles, but his job would be easier and he would win more championships. But when I saw Tyronn Lue make the adjustments that he did against the Utah Jazz, going into a zone scheme and even banking on Terrence Mann to carry the Los Angeles Clippers past the Utah Jazz, that's when I knew that Kawhi Leonard was more likely to stay. And it's important for me to say that, in my opinion, no matter what report you're going to get this offseason, I'm expecting Kawhi Leonard to stay. And I'll tell you why after I get to these reports, because these are some very interesting reports. So the moment that the Los Angeles Clippers lost, we got this report from Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer saying that the Dallas Mavericks and Miami Heat plan to make a hard push to acquire Kawhi Leonard. The New York Knicks will also pursue any superstar that becomes available. Tell me if that sounds familiar or not, guys. And a long list of other suitors would at least make an attempt if he hits the market. Who wouldn't want a 30-year-old two-time NBA Finals MVP that's still performing at an all-NBA level? Dallas is considered by some executives to be the most serious threat to land Kawhi because of Luka Doncic's presence and the front office's ability to create maximum cap space or work out a sign and trade. During Leonard's years with Nike, he also developed a good relationship with Nico Harrison, the Mavs' new general manager, and a former longtime executive at the company. Now, on the Miami Heat side of things, Kawhi Leonard tried to recruit Jimmy Butler to the Clippers before Paul George was acquired. So Paul George was plan B and Jimmy Butler was plan A. So Miami could offer Kawhi an enticing chance to play with him, though the Heat can't create max cap space. They could always work out a sign and trade just like they did to acquire Jimmy Butler from the Sixers in 2019. Now, this is all really interesting information, and of course, Kawhi Leonard to the Dallas Mavericks or Kawhi Leonard to the Miami Heat would instantly make those teams a title contender. As a matter of fact, I think Kawhi Leonard and Luka Doncic, their games are literally synergistic because Kawhi Leonard could use Luka Doncic's playmaking ability to really help him take the next step. Kawhi Leonard could take over towards the end of games where Luka, at least during the first 2 seasons of his career, sometimes he gets gassed out at the end of games, mainly because there's a lot on his shoulders. So there's no doubt in my mind that this move, this transaction for both teams would really take them to the next level. But then comes the part where I'm being realistic about things. And I'm sure most of you guys agree with me, and let me know in the comment section down below if you agree with me. Kawhi Leonard left the Toronto Raptors for one reason. As a matter of fact, Kawhi Leonard forced himself out of San Antonio for one reason, and that's because through it all, he made it clear that he wanted to play close to home. And bear in mind, this is a guy that has already won multiple championships. You know, he's absolutely validated in the championships he's won in San Antonio and the championship he won for Toronto. He's considered to be a hero in Toronto, despite only playing in Toronto for 1 year. And he left a championship core, which in my opinion, this is a team that could have been at least a favorite to repeat as Eastern Conference champions, just so he can potentially form a contender that's close to his hometown. And I think at this point in his career, that rules above all. That's the most important thing to Kawhi Leonard. He doesn't care about winning championships because if he did, then he would have formed a super team with the Los Angeles Lakers if he wanted to be easily winning rings. I think what's important to him is he does want to win championships for his hometown, and he wants to be celebrated in his hometown, and he wants to be celebrated by being the #1 option in his hometown. And the best way of doing that is doing what LeBron James did for the Lakers, pulling out a franchise from the doldrums of mediocrity, which is what Kawhi Leonard is trying to do with the Los Angeles Clippers. And clearly, although the Clippers did make some poor decisions over the past year, the Rajon Rondo trade never ended up panning out. Signing Luke Kennard so far seems to have been a misstep. Signing Marcus Morris seemed to have been a good move. And Tyronn Lue is definitely the coach that you want leading this team for the future. Kawhi Leonard is getting closer and closer to his goal of being able to win a championship as a member of the Los Angeles Clippers. Therefore, even though he is going to opt out, which no matter what, he is going to opt out, I expect him to sign a huge max contract with the Los Angeles Clippers and stay there for the rest of his career. And I think he's done moving around, and I don't think the Los Angeles Clippers are like a toxic environment that he's trying to escape from. But that's my take on the situation. Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think Kawhi would go to Miami? Do you think he'll go to Dallas? Or do you agree with me and think he's going to stay as a member of the Los Angeles Clippers? Make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications and leave a like to enter our giveaway for a next-gen console. And of course, we discussed this topic on the Laced Up podcast featuring Mike Warzema and Get Like Coop. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.